Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rula Deeb. I'm a senior principal at Geosyntac in Oakland, California, and the coordinator of the webinar series on behalf of SERDP and ESTCP. I have the pleasure of facilitating today's event. This webinar focuses on DoD-funded research efforts to develop and demonstrate technologies for PFAS destruction. First, Dr. Mike Wang from Rice University will talk about his research on the use of novel boron nitride semiconductor photocatalysts for PFAS decomposition. Second, Dr. Dave Major from Savron will present his research on developing and demonstrating both in situ and ex situ smoldering combustion approaches for PFAS destruction. Each of the two presentations will be followed by a brief Q&A session, and we will conclude the webinar with a longer Q&A session. The next two slides provide instructions on optimizing your webinar experience. If you have not done so already, please download Zoom at the link shown here and provide it to you in your webinar registration confirmation email. If you have problems downloading Zoom, you can view the slides using a compatible internet browser such as Firefox, IE, or Edge, and by creating a free Zoom account. If you have any technical difficulties or if your screen freezes, try keying in Control and F5 to perform a hard refresh of your screen. And in case of continued difficulties, just download a PDF of the slides from the webinar webpage and call into the conference line provided to you in your webinar registration confirmation email. Note that we will also be live streaming the webinar on the SERDP and ESTCP YouTube channel at the link shown here. So that's another way to follow today's proceedings. This broadcast will be listen only. You can submit questions by using the Q&A box on your screen. You do not need to wait until the Q&A period to submit your questions. We encourage you to get them in well in advance of the Q&A sessions. When you submit your questions, please add your organization name at the end of the question so that we can identify you during the Q&A session. Please do not submit questions in the chat box because it is reserved for comments related to technical difficulties. With that, I would like to introduce Dr. Andrea Leeson, who is the Deputy Director of SERDP and ESTCP, as well as the Program Manager for the Environmental Restoration Program area. Dr. Leeson has been with SERDP and ESTCP since 2001, and before that, she was a research leader at the Battelle Memorial Institute, where she conducted scientific research on in situ bioremediation and the design and implementation of innovative biological, chemical, and physical treatment technologies for site remediation and industrial wastewater. Andrea received her doctoral degree in environmental engineering from the Johns Hopkins University. Andrea, please get us started.
Thanks so much, Rula, and thank you as well to everyone who's joined the webinar today. We do appreciate you being here. And I am quickly going to go through some introductory slides because I know everyone is here to hear our technical speakers today. But before we get to the technical presentations, I would like to give a little bit of an overview about the sponsors of this research, SERDP and ESTCP. SERDP is the Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program. ESTCP is the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program, and these are defense-wide programs within the DoD, whereas SERDP, though, is also a partnership between the DoD, the Department of Energy, and the Environmental Protection Agency. And really, SERDP, I see this as a traditional research and development program, and we tackle priority environmental science and technology issues that focus on DoD requirements. ESTCP is a companion program to SERDP, and under ESTCP, what we do is we capitalize on past investments under SERDP or other research programs, and we're specifically looking to transition technologies or bodies of knowledge out of the lab and into the field and examine them under real-world situations. And the goal here being is that ESTCP can take those projects or those technologies to just below the commercialization threshold so that they can then launch into the commercialization phase. We have a number of focus areas within SERDP and ESTCP, PFAS and AFFF, installation restoration, installation resilience, resource conservation, installation energy innovation, resilience water systems, UXO response and remediation, as well as weapon system and platforms. And the presentations you'll see today fall within the PFAS and AFFF focus area. This difficult to read slide we have included here because you can also find it on the SERDP and ESTCP website. And if you're interested in PFAS, this is an amazing resource to find out everything that SERDP and ESTCP have funded within this area. You'll find this when you go to the website, that this is an interactive map. And by clicking throughout this map, you can get the list of various projects and the topics that they focused on. And then through there, the list of projects will also link you through to individual web pages for these projects. I really encourage you, if you have any interest in PFAS, to go to the graphic. You'll find the link in the chat room. With our webinar series, we do tackle a number of other topics though, and as you can see here, these are upcoming webinars over the next few weeks throughout the summer. And the variety of topics we cover ranges from climate issues to more PFAS work to dealing with UXO. And as you can see here, there are more topics on PFAS later in the year. If you go to this website, you will be able to register for the upcoming webinars. You'll be able to see topics that are being released even further into the year. And you will also be able to see past webinars as we archive everything we've done in the past. So at this point, let me turn it back to Rula to introduce our speakers for today.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It is now my absolute pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, Professor Mike Wong, who is the chair of the Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering at Rice University. Mike is the principal investigator of the Catalysis and Nanomaterials Lab at Rice and research thrust leader in the Nanotechnology-Enabled Water Treatment Engineering Research Center. This is an NSF-funded center. Mike is a fellow of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, the American Chemical Society, and the Royal Society of Chemistry in the UK. He is a recipient of the 2023 Lawrence K. Cecil Award, which is the highest environmental honor in chemical engineering. And in terms of academic background, he received a bachelor's degree from Caltech, a master's degree from MIT, and a doctorate from Caltech, all in chemical engineering. Mike, we're so happy to have you. Please proceed.
Thank you so much, Rula, for the very kind words, and Andrea for kicking us off, and greetings to everyone. I'm very excited to tell everyone about what we're doing with photocatalysis and this interesting material that we call boron nitride. And the outline is as follows, but I want to make sure that we're calibrated a little bit to what I mean when I talk about semiconductor photocatalysis. I'll go through some of our initial results and present where we're at in terms of how well boron nitride works for certain types of PFAS and certain types of waters, and really kind of give a direction of where I think can be very exciting research directions as towards a deployable technology. So just to go ahead and jump right in, everyone, this is my one slide that introduces semiconductor photocatalysis. And one way to think about this from operationally is to think about what a semiconductor is. It's a material that has this special property of being able to absorb light, and the light could be of different wavelengths. And the wavelengths I'll be talking about now, it would be in the ultraviolet or UV range. And the idea is that this material, kind of schematically drawn in this little sphere down at the bottom here, absorbs the light, and the light introduces energy that is sufficient to activate and to energize, you might say, an electron within this material. And this electron is activated to become a reactable and reactive electron, and also creates what we call a hole, sort of like the absence of electrons, but that also is reactive. You have two reactive species now that would be at the surface of this material, and the electron would then be capable of doing a reaction, shown in this case here, this reduction reaction. And then the hole, represented by H plus at the bottom, would react with something. In this case here, it would be with our target contaminant, and it would oxidize or pull an electron away from the contaminant. Our contaminant of interest today would be PFAS, but this technique has been used for other types of contaminants, such as VOCs and other organic compounds. And the idea here is that by having this material that's activated by light, you run two reactions. Generally, when we talk about photocatalysis, it's on the oxidative side, where the hole takes away electrons from the contaminant. That turns the contaminant into a degraded version of the contaminant. And once the surface hole reacts, then the material continues to absorb light, continues to generate these electron hole pairs, and continues to run these surface reactions. Okay. So generally, these photocatalytic materials, when activated, produce a very oxidative environment for organic contaminants to degrade. Okay. We generally know that, and this is my other deep chemistry slide here, is, whenever it comes to PFAS, and in this case, PFOA, we recognize, and the literature and the communities recognize, that these things do break down under not just photocatalytic degradation, but also through oxidative pathways. And it's generally been observed that PFOA goes through what I show here in a circle format, a DHEH degradation pathway. It's a mouthful, but it stands for decarboxylation, hydroxylation, elimination, and hydrolysis pathway. A shorter way of thinking about this, we call it sometimes the unzipping mechanism. So if you look at the bottom here as maybe the PFOA, the CH, the idea here is that in water, it deprotonates, and this deprotonate version reacts with the hole that would be on and associated with the semiconductor material, again, shown here in this circle. And this electron gets pulled away to create this radical, and that this radical starts to fall apart. And first way is to decarboxylate, meaning that the head group, the CO2 minus head group, pops off to release the CO2. So you actually start to remove one carbon, and then this one carbon less radical then reconfigures and reacts with water or hydroxyl groups to reform molecules that are still reactive. And when you get to this stage here, the carbon fluorine bond, which is normally very difficult to break, automatically breaks as the fluoride combines with a hydrogen on the molecule to come off as HF. Now, HF doesn't come off as HF as a molecule, but comes into the solution as H positive and a fluoride ion. It releases one HF equivalent, but actually it releases another HF equivalent, so it releases two fluoride ions. And by the time everything is all said and done, you get back a PFOA molecule, but with one carbon less. This becomes a C7, the C7 becomes a C6, so on and so forth. And in this way, this PFOA unzips to ultimately become CO2 and H plus, and then F minus in solution. So people have studied TiO2 for photocatalysis for over 50 years. TiO2 is the standard material that generally are used as the workhorse material. It's non-toxic, it's commercially available, and the quality control is pretty well understood because it's manufactured at a large scale. And this data here shows that TiO2 can break down PFOA through this unzipping mechanism. It's just slow. To show you the data, the y-axis is the PFOA concentration, and the other y-axis is the fluoride ion concentration. For those thinking about jumping into this field, I would always say, look at not only the loss and the lowering of the PFOA concentration. We use PFOA as our sort of model, a PFAS compound to break down. But we also look for the evidence of carbon-fluorine bond breakage, and that comes into the form of these fluoride ions measured in bulk solution. The y-axis, the x-axis is the reaction time, and without the light, the TiO2 by itself does nothing to the PFOA. Under these conditions here, there's not enough TiO2 to absorptively remove PFOA from solution, and that the concentration pretty much stays the same, shown in that dashed line at the top. The 120 micromolar is equivalent to 50 ppm. You introduce the light. The UV light that we use is sourced at is primarily at 254. This is UVC, and the combination of TiO2 with 254 light. There is air in the system. Shown in that blue line, it drops and it goes down. And in this particular reaction, these are one of our earliest data. That after 6 hours, it gets down to, we lose about 80% of the PFOA. And more importantly, we see that at the end of this reaction, about 2/3 of the total fluorine in the whole system or attached to the PFOA molecule has come off. Well, then you're thinking, well, where's the 1/3 where's the rest of it? And basically it comes off from the shorter chain PFOA versions that continues to unzip. And as it continues to unzip, it continues to release the fluoride. So if you run this for another couple of hours, you will eventually get down to no PFOA to the detection limits here, about 1 ppm, and gets close to 100% defluorination. So conclusion is that TiO2 does work, but it's just very slow. And so you see at the bottom here, just to go ahead and say it, is that the boron nitride is much more active than this. Okay. Boron nitride, what is this material? Well, it's also non-toxic. It's also commercially available, sourced from different companies out there. And in general, there are different versions of boron nitride, but the one that we work with is this hexagonal form of boron nitride. People will read it and describe it as HBN. For the purposes of this talk, I'll call it just BN. But it's essentially just like graphite, but instead of carbon, it's boron and nitrogen arranged in a hexagonal shape. So this is another two-dimensional material that is in fact very useful for breaking down PFOA and PFAS. Here is just some highlights here, but it is commercially available. It is used commercially for its ceramic properties. It's also used in cosmetics because it is white color and it's very good as a solid lubricant. So here's the contrasting data. So same data format as the earlier slide, but with the boron nitride case, you can see that the PFOA concentration drops much more quickly, that at the end of this reaction, we get to below non-detect, in this case here again, 1 ppm. And the fluoride ions released is a little bit more than 2/3. And you can clearly see that even though the PFOA has been eliminated, that the fluoride ions are still being created, and that is due to the shorter chain versions that not shown in this graph here, but we do detect through LCMS. Okay. So the conclusion here, and this is when we published this several years ago, where we said, the boron nitride has this interesting capability of breaking down PFOA and other PFAS compounds, but also does it in a way that's faster than TiO2. And that really opened up some possibilities now. And one of the things I want to make sure I end with my talk is that photocatalysis, while it's been studied for many decades, we think that the boron nitride really reopens the door for photocatalysis as a renewed technology for that can be very viable for breaking down PFAS. Okay. So for this project, and really with the help of SERDP to be part of this ecosystem there, we really were able to explore what we can do with the boron nitride photocat in terms of other types of PFAS structures. That was one of our first goals here. The second goal is to look at not just the degradation in DI water. We love to do that in the lab, but to really start to look at real water matrices and the operational conditions that would be relevant for ultimate use. And the third part is, and I'll describe a little bit more, is how would we use these powders in a deployable format? And I will give you some data later on that shows that we've identified one way of using these boron nitride as a recirculating slurry coupled with a ceramic membrane unit. Okay. So just to get ahead of some of the general research results so far, we've looked at other compounds besides PFOA, and I'm not going to go through the entire table here. We originally were looking at 429, but we found that we were able to look at the 24 that were available for us to study in the lab. And these are in the 6 different categories of the PFCAs, PFSAs, the ether versions of those two, the fluorotelomers, as well as the PFAA precursors. Okay. When we compare and contrast the boron nitride with the TiO2, we can see just very, as the way we kind of screen through, we definitely see a structural dependence on the ability for boron nitride or TiO2 to degrade these different PFAS structures here. And so the idea is that we've come across, some pretty, general conclusions is that the PFCAs do break down very readily on the BN faster than the TiO2. The sulfonates are hard to degrade under both with the BN and the TiO2. The PFECAs break down pretty easily over the boron nitride. The FTS, the fluorotelomers, break down approximately about the same, whether it's TiO2 or boron nitride. Okay. So very interestingly, we start to understand a little bit how some of the properties of boron nitride that makes it very good for the long chain versions of the PFAS, and it's one of the attributes that the TiO2 does not share. Okay, so we've learned a lot of things by comparing and answering the question, what makes the BN better than the TiO2? Okay. So one of the things that we sort of moved on to really think about is, as we explored the second objective is looking at the effective water matrix effects is generally the presence of salt good or bad for photocatalysis? And so it's almost a rhetorical question because generally having salt species is bad in general for catalysis. The results here on the left-hand side, you'll see the TiO2 shown in blue and the red for the BN. The open circles are results that I showed earlier, but plotted on the same graph here for DI in DI water. So TiO2, PFOA drops, but with the BN, that drops much more quickly. We do the same exact experiment, but instead of DI water, we use 6,000 ppm of NaCl. And we can see that the TiO2 in the blue, the solid blue line, the PFOA concentrations are much higher than the TiO2 in the DI water. With the salt, the TiO2 becomes less active. That's the takeaway there. For the red, the BN, in the presence of 6,000 ppm, there is no difference. In fact, you can barely see the open circles, red circles there, because the full red circles almost overlap with the open circles there. So this was very telling for us that the salinity is not bad for BN photocat. We thought, well, maybe is there a light to wavelength dependence? And so we were using the UVC lamps. We used a vacuum UV lamps as well, and there's no difference. In fact, the TiO2 is works even worse under the vacuum UV, and there's no difference for the boron nitride. So for whatever reason, we have some good and strong hypotheses here, is that the boron nitride really shows little deactivation in TDS waters, where the TDS is about 6,000 ppm. So we said, well, how far can we push it? Just how much salt can the BN material tolerate? And so we tried these experiments out. And The data shown here, the data are the same for the shown in the previous slide, but we're going to add additional salts here. So the purplish hexagon, that's the previous slide. We want that will go from 6,000 ppm to 60,000 ppm. And, you know, it starts to become less active, but it's still active. And this starts to get into the range of other types of waters that if we decide to be interested in it, well, maybe BN PhotoCat could be an interesting way to help regenerate the ion exchange wash streams. And even if we get even higher to RO concentrates here. So now we can start to think about BN PhotoCat as a way to couple in with some of the other physical methods to remove PFAS at this point here, which remains a problem when it generates a more concentrated a stream that needs to be treated still. Okay. Continuing on, we tried all sorts of waters. It's got us really excited. We have a nice collaboration and contact with the Bergendorf site in New Mexico, and Dr. Chappelle was able to send us some waters where their brackish well water had some contamination with PFOA. On the left-hand side is their real waters. The data is a little funny. You know, with the presence of light, it looks like with just the vacuum UV, there's an increase in the concentration of PFOA. We think it's because the concentration of PFOA is so low, we can get a detection limits down to ppb and ppt now. We can actually see the UV light source perhaps desorbing the PFOA off the in the solution, but especially off the TiO2. The TiO2 somehow is creating perhaps, but really we think this is helping to desorb the PFOA. But if you look at the BN material, the PFOA concentration drops to below 1 ppb. If we look on the right-hand side, looking at the water matrix effect, we spiked it with 50 ppm PFOA, and there's a clear difference in the operation. The BN PhotoCat, much more active for breaking down PFOA in this brackish water. TiO2 is inactive, just like the vacuum UV. Okay. We used real TFF contaminated groundwaters. We were able to get some draw samples, and the solid bars, you'll see 4 different graphs here. I'll just focus on the upper left-hand side, where these are the PFCAs, including PFOA. That's in the before treatment. And then after treatment, you can see that the PFOA completely goes away, and that you'll see these larger hashed lines that represents the shorter chain, the unzipped versions of the PFOA. And if you look at the other categories, you can sort of see that, you know, the boron nitride PhotoCat seems to have a pretty strong effect on the PFCAs, the sulfonates, the ECAs, and the fluorotelomers here. The before and after, comparing the solid to the dashed or to the hashed marked data, really indicates that the boron nitride is able to break down these AFFF components in real contaminated waters at the ppb level. Okay, these are initial results that we're going to build on and as we proceed on and expand on our research. To push it on further, how far can we push it? We looked at a commercial AFFF. This is a Buckeye material. And this is diluted 3 times. This is on the left-hand side. This is what we measured. After photocatalysis, we look on the right-hand side for both the TiO2 and the BN. We can see that the fluorotelomers break down, the PFCAs break down. We do see the shorter chains sort of linger around, a little less so for the boron nitride. And that's going to be something we're going to try to focus on, is how do you handle the shorter chain of versions of the PFCAs. If we really dilute it down to and really challenge our detection limits here, we have 6.2 FTS in our really diluted AFFF. We can break it down to mostly the C4s here, and so all the fluorotelomers are gone, and everything but this PFBAs and the the C5 versions is lingering. And so so there's some work to be done on the materials development side, but interestingly, that the boron nitride, as well as the TiO2 in this case here, does work under multiple conditions here, and in this case here for AFFF. Okay. To start to round up, how are we pushing this to a deployable technology here? we've identified of the different ways of finding and identifying the best way to use these powders is to work with a slurry type of reactor that's been developed by a company called Purifix. And they have a technology that has been designed around TiO2. We've been working with Purifix for the last several years, where we envision the boron nitride as a drop-in replacement for the TiO2. And the way it works is that the contaminated water is mixed in with a slurry of the boron nitride, and as it circulates around a bank of vacuum UV lamps, and the cleaned or treated water is extracted through a ceramic membrane, and then the ceramic membrane keeps the slurry from leaving with the clean water, and it continues to recirculate within this reactor here. The flow rate's about 10 gallons per minute, but it's designable for hundreds and even thousands of gallons per minute. Early results here, we have much better results now, but just to get things started, under these conditions here, the vacuum UV works by itself. The light is very powerful, and it does do direct photolysis of PFOA. The TiO2 also works, but not as well. The TiO2 sort of gets in the way because of light blockage. But with the boron nitride under this, what I would call sort of a dirty experiment, the combination of VUV with the boron nitride takes down the PFOA to non-detect after 1.5 hours under recirculating mode. And I will have to say that we're not working with 50 milliliter volumes here. We're talking about 14 liters of water here. So we're talking larger volumes of water being treated in this case here. Okay. So to wrap up, we concluded from this project so far that BN is very effective at degrading most types of PFAS for the library of 24 that we've looked at. Sulfonates does remain a challenge for both BN and TiO2. We can really break down PFAS in various types of water matrices and down, especially for sulfonates at low ppb levels. The salt resistance, that's a new discovery here, and we thank SERDP for allowing us to discover this, but we think that this can allow us to really get this into waters that will be maybe perhaps close to saline aquifers perhaps. And we think that the Purifix reactor, the slurry type of reactor, is a scalable way to use our boron nitride in a way that can be deployed in a unit format at different sites around the country. So as we take a step back a little bit, I hope I made convincing a case that the boron nitride photocat really opens up doors because of this new novel material, and there is a way to use this in a portable, self-contained system, not just for PFOA, but for other types of PFAS in different types of waters here. Next steps, we want to learn more about how the interactions of the boron nitride works with the different PFAS as we optimize a better catalyst structure. Can we optimize the reactor units in terms of better understanding of the energy requirements? That includes the lights, the pump, and not just the EEO, the energy order for reduction, contaminant reduction. But overall, I think that this is a very exciting area, especially if we can start to tackle the durability issues that we're starting to study now. But the fact that these boron nitride is non-toxic, is commercially available, it can be dropped into a slurry flow reactor. We were excited that we're on this track here. I want to give thanks to the Nano Center at Rice, the Newt Center, also the newly established Rice Water Institute, our collaborators, Geosyntec, 3M, Purifix, excellent discussions with Jingyoung Liu and Ezra Cates, and our collaborator, Linda Capel at the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. And I thank everyone here for your attention. And I end here with my slides for further reading. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mike, for a great presentation. As a reminder to our audience, please submit your questions by using the Q&A box on the screen. We have received a lot of questions, Mike, so I'm going to start relaying them to you. The first one is from the Air Force Civil Engineer Center. You alluded to this a little bit. You said you increased your volume from milliliter to liter, but what volumes of impacted water do you think you can feasibly treat with boron nitride?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I the larger volumes of water, it's quite interesting. We can't just use 14 liters of DI water. That's a lot of DI water. So we've been actually using tap water to help, provide the balance to fill out the reactor essentially. In terms of larger volumes of water, I don't anticipate much problem at all, except that if we do think about pumping hundreds of liters or gallons of water at a site, we would have to worry about silt. We would have to worry about organic matter in the water. And that's where we would have a pretreatment step. I would say probably, I would imagine, that this unit would be part of a treatment train. Maybe have a pretreatment or a fan bag filter in the front as a way to help tolerate some of the more macroscopic contaminants in the water. But I imagine multiple gallons, hundreds of thousands of gallons of water if we really want to be futuristic about this. But I think the volume of water will not be a problem in terms of boron nitride impact performance.
Wonderful, thank you. This next question is from the Science, Technology, and Research Institute of Delaware. How low can you go? How low can the boron nitride get to in terms of PFAS levels? And do you expect it to be able to get down to the anticipated drinking water level? Yeah.
Yes. No, thank you for that question. I think one of the first things we learned about getting into the PFAS space is you have to learn how to look for them and how to measure them. And I would say in the last 2 years or so, we've been able to look at things at the ppm level. That's why we started so high in order to be able to see such high concentrations. But to get down to the anticipated regulatory levels, you have to get down to the PPT. But to get down to PPT, you have to get through the PPB levels. And so we have those capabilities at Rice now. And I would say, ideally, as a scientist, we can get down to zero. Wouldn't that just be the ideal situation? That I think would probably be impractical. I'd say if we get down to PPT levels, I think that's reasonable and doable. It requires not only the development of the material, but also how we would operate the unit itself. So at this point, we can confidently say we can get down to the PPB levels. And with a little bit of R&D, we can get down to the, 4 PPT is 0.4 PPT will be challenging, I would say, but I would say it's a good goal to try to get to, but definitely 70 PPT we can get to.
Wonderful, thank you. This next question is from the U.S. Forest Service. Do you know what the order of the reaction kinetics is?
Yeah, we suspect that at high concentrations, it's zero order. We've been having these discussions with internally with our collaborators and with Ezra Cates at Clemson, and as the concentration goes lower, and that speaks to how the molecule is covering the surface, that as the concentration goes lower, we think it goes from a zero order to a first order, and if we go to really low, we probably get down to maintaining a first order, but we haven't proven that yet. But it does change as a function of concentration.
Thank you. This next question is from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. What is the lifespan of the titanium dioxide versus the boron nitride? And have you seen any indication that these media may become less effective for the photocatalyst process over time?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. From the TiO2 perspective, one might think about potential, dissolution or breakdown, things that we've seen and things that we've seen reported. We haven't seen any significant dissolution or leaching of TiO2 or breakdown of the TiO2. In terms of durability, there might be an impact from the leaching, but we don't see that. But if you run this for several months or several years, in the long term, we don't have a way to assess that just yet. But that's something on our to-do list. The durability might come in the form of things might be absorbing irreversibly on the TiO2. I'd say these potential scenarios would apply to the boron nitride also, but we don't have a straight answer for that yet. So far, we've not seen the boron nitride leach out, break down significantly, but we have to verify that over longer term operation, but also in the different types of water matrices. Great question. Thank you.
The next question is from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Titanium dioxide is expensive. What is the cost for boron nitride?
We've costed it out by just looking at what we call the Sigma Aldrich price, small amounts, but one really wants to look at the largest volumes that's available and that can be commercially purchased. And so right now we can look at a cost estimate about half the price for boron nitride compared to TiO2 by the pound. So that would be the first thing I'll say just to speak about the cost. And I'd say in terms of the usage, the cost of the catalyst is not meant to be something that you're asked to continuously add. Because it's a catalyst, the idea is that it should linger in the system for weeks and months, if not years. And from what I've learned from the practitioners is that when they do use the TiO2 for the photocat system, they really don't add much TiO2 except to top off every time they switch out the lamps. And so in terms of the overall catalyst cost of the overall unit operation, it's less than 5%.
Thank you, Mike. The next question is from the Marine Corps Base, Quantico. Have you noted any intermediates throughout the zipping process, starting with PFAS?
Yep. Great. Thank you again for that question. I would say the answer is yes, we do detect the shorter chain versions in the lab studies for sure. I think the question might be, as we start to use realistic waters, does the water matrix impact the types and abundance of the intermediates? And so as we unzip from C8 it goes to C7, C6s, and we do see the C7 go up in concentration, come back down, C6 goes up and comes back down. So the effect of the water matrix, I would say, it would slow things down if there's an impact, but we expect them to form. We also expect them to go away as well, the longer you run it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This next question is from the Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific. Have you tried photocatalysis on waters with other co-contaminants present aside from salt? Or do you plan to do so in the future?
The answer is no and yes. No, we haven't tried it. It is on our to-do list. I would love to start to begin to challenge the BN photocat system. So it's not just the boron nitride material, but it's the system now. And I think that depending on the co-contaminant effect, we do know that boron nitride is effective for other types of organics. And so we would hypothesize that there'd probably be a commingling effect that could either be a positive or a neutral effect, but we'd love to try some waters.
Great, thank you so much, Mike. This next question is from ExxonMobil. You mentioned, or you talked about the mass balance with the unzipping process, that you're not getting to 100%. How close do you expect to get in terms of closing that mass balance?
Thank you for that question. In our publications that came out this year and the last 2 years, under idealized conditions in our little batch reactor in our lab, we call it in our light box experiments, in DI water, we do get to 100% fluoride mass balance. We track not only the fluoride ions detected in the bulk, but also the fluorine that's attached to the shorter chain byproducts. And then we just sort of sum it all up and it comes close to 100% plus minus 5%. So under those conditions, we do get the mass balance. Under, when we start to challenge it using real waters under larger scales, we haven't proven that, but we suspect we would get close to that. But that would be, hopefully that gives a sense of our confidence level of being able to track all the fluorides.
Thank you. This next question is from the U.S. Department of the Interior, Indian Affairs. Can you talk more about how the PFOA may be desorbed from the brackish water in the presence of titanium dioxide?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's something we have to do a little bit deeper dive there. I would say that for that early experiments, when we were using the brackish water with that came in with the 43, I think ppb PFOA, just in the presence of the UV light, the concentration went up already a little bit. So that might be a bit of an outlier, or maybe might be an experimental artifact in terms of measurements. But for the TiO2, we feel a little bit more confident that perhaps there is some pre-absorption that's going on. We do commingle the TiO2 with the water first for at least half an hour before we turn on the light. And so perhaps that desorbs the PFOA off the surface, but that needs a little bit further work for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, for an excellent presentation and a very engaging Q&A. We have 45 questions left. We'll try to get to some of those during the final Q&A, but it is time to shift gears to our second presentation. So don't go anywhere, Mike. Our second speaker today is Dr. David Major, who is a senior consultant at Geosyntac and Chevron, based out of Ontario, Canada. Dave has developed and commercialized various remediation technologies in conjunction with universities in the US, Canada, and the UK. He has served as a co-PI for over 10 SERDP and ESTCP projects and won the 2021 SERDP Project of the Year Award for his work on the smoldering destruction of PFAS, which you're going to hear about today. Dave has received several other awards, including the University of Waterloo Faculty of Science Alumni of Honor Award, the Space Hall of Fame Award for helping NASA commercialize products from space benefiting planet Earth, and the ICE Telford Premium Award for papers on ground improvement technologies. Dave received bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in biology from the University of Waterloo. Dave, please get us started with this second portion of the webinar.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Just getting myself set up here. Okay. So I'm going to give you a presentation outline, and I'll tell you what I'm going to tell you. So I want to make sure everybody's on the same page of what is smoldering combustion and how it's really different from incineration. I'll also talk to you about treating PFAS by smoldering, how it works. Then I want to talk to you about in situ smoldering process, just generally give you an idea of how we do it in situ. And then I'm going to give you an overview of our mobile Star Express project, which is an ex situ application to treat soils. And then also an overview over in situ treatment of smoldering that we'll be conducting this year as well. And of course, conclusions, and of course, why the DoD should be excited about this. So what is smoldering combustion? It is definitely not incineration, but because it's flameless. It's a flameless exothermic reaction that will occur on the surface of the solid fuel. It's similar to any combustion process. It's based on the combustion triangle. You need a fuel and an oxidant and heat all in the same place for this process to occur. And you are actually all experts in smoldering, and because you've done probably barbecues, and here charcoal briquettes are a classic example of a smoldering reaction. You know, it's a porous media. It's a solid fuel in this case. You put a little heat to get it going, like using a resistive electrical heater to get it going. You take that heat away, and the process keeps on going. And so we're kind of doing the same kind of process, but what we found out is that we could take hydrocarbons and mix them into the soil. They could be there from contaminants themselves, and they basically create this soil hydrocarbon mixture, turns into a smoldering combustion briquette. And so what we do here is that we're putting a resistive heater in there, starts the pyrolysis process of the hydrocarbons, turning them into a char, at which point the combustion occurs on the surface of the char. And then that actually heat is released and trapped by the porous media. Because it traps that heat, it helps heat up the rest of the fuel and get it to combustion temperatures and continue that char formation and allow that combustion process to occur on the surface of the char, really releasing quite a lot of heat. So we use oxygen and air as our oxidant. And then, of course, I pointed out before, we just have a low power for ignition to start that process. We take the heater away, and you get a self-sustaining reaction process as long as air is either flux, effectively or diffusively flux to the surface of the fuel. So that problem with PFAS, though, is that it's not really smolderable in and of itself. Typically, it's too low of a concentration in most contaminated soils for us to use it as a fuel source. So what we do is add something else. And one example is using granular activated carbon, or GAC. And we initially did some of the work looking at, GAC is always contaminated GAC, not necessarily virgin GAC, is a way to get a 2,4 treatment, get rid of the GAC, and also get rid of the contamination in the soil. So that's what we do, is we just substitute we add GAC into the soil to create a smoldering situation. In essence, we basically barbecue PFAS and all the other contaminants in the soil. So one of the things is, well, how much GAC do you have to add? We all know that when you add PFAS and some heat, get up to high enough temperatures, will start decomposing, forming hydrogen fluoride and also shorter chain compounds. We know this process really starts around 700 degrees Celsius, and you start really gets full decomposition temperatures well over 900. And some of our initial work was looking at, well, what kind of temperatures can we get? How much GAC do we have to add? Now, on this graph here, it just shows you the GAC concentration as grams of GAC per kilogram of soil, and the average smoldering temperature achieved, which is on the left-hand side, in degrees Celsius. And what we're seeing here is that as we increase the GAC concentration, we basically almost have a linear response in terms of the actual amount of heat that we generate. And that heat that's generated is pretty well insensitive to the flux of oxygen coming in. We're basically being driven by the concentration of the GAC creating those temperatures. So around 35 grams of GAC per kilogram of soil, we can get well over 900 degrees Celsius. And you can see from this graph, it's possible to achieve temperatures of over 1,100, 1,200 degrees, or even 1,300 degrees Celsius if you add enough GAC mixed in with your porous matrix, such as contaminated soil. So we've taken our first initial work was looking at, as I pointed out, the treatment of investigative dry waste, such as contaminated GAC and soils that are being drilled out of the ground. And we did a series of experiments where, starting off from a lab scale all the way up to a field demonstration, looking at how treatment of PFAS. And the real highlights of this is that basically we get well over 99.9% reduction in destruction of the PFAS itself from the soils when you compare pre and post treatment samples. We also found out that calcium oxide was a great addition to have. We have add a little bit of calcium oxide into the soils. It actually allows us to destroy PFAS at somewhat lower temperatures, but it also has the added benefit of also sequestering the hydrogen fluoride, forming calcium fluoride, a mineral phase on the soil. And this project also had excellent mass balance based on fluoride concentrations. Well, we found out very little emissions. We see some 2 or 3 chain carbon length PFAS maybe being trapped in our emission trap systems, typically in the order like 0.02% of the total fluoride in the system. We'd also get the rest of the fluoride mass coming out of the system would be as hydrogen fluoride if it escaped. But we also used other methods to determine what happened. We used X-ray diffraction and stuff like that to assure us that we got calcium fluoride formation. And we also used the work done by Notre Dame, looking at PIGGY analysis, which is a particle-induced gamma emission to actually track fluorine in our soils and in our traps as well. And that gave us a really high confidence in our ability to understand the total fluoride mass balance in the system. So when we apply when we apply smoldering, we apply it in 2 different methods. We call one STAR-X, which is an ex situ application, a batch system, and in situ, which we call STAR. And the ex situ is what we call the hot pad system, which is basically an engineered structure that contains both heaters and air distribution at the bottom. Below a grate system, we put the soils on top and cover them. And then we do basically start the process at the bottom, and you get the smoldering front moving through the soil pile. We can also do it in situ. It's not intuitive, but we can actually get smoldering under the water table, which I'll talk about a little bit more. as I talk through this presentation. So here's an example what we did with the Star Express, and the problem we're facing is that we can treat very large volumes of hydrocarbon mass, but they're typically large plants. These hot pads are fairly large; they hold about 250 cubic meters of soil at a time. We have to set up the site as you're building basically a plant, and it's great if you're going to treat large volumes of soil over longer times. It's very cost effective. But most PFAS problems are relatively small. And in contrast, as you can see, the Kuwait project we're doing, there's 300,000 cubic meters of sludge and 700,000 cubic meters of hydrocarbon impacted soils being treated over several years. So we wanted something that it's going to be able to treat them like the 5,000 or 20,000 cubic meters of soil, which are just so often associated with, source areas and things like that, like fire training pits and things at various bases or other locations where things have been disposed. So our objective is to develop something that's mobile and it's rapid, and it's low energy needs solution, so it allows it to be deployed to remote locations as required. We want to demonstrate we can meet soil criteria, and the site that we're demonstrating this is at the Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, or JBER, up in Alaska. And we are comparing the cost and performance of our technology to 2 other soil treatment technologies as well. So it's an exciting program in terms of all the work that's been doing, and the vendors are working very collaboratively to work together to make this project a success. So our Star Express system is actually very simple. Relatively speaking, we got a small, we call them hot pads, but we call them Star Express systems. They hold about 35 cubic meters of soil apiece. They're mobile. They can be transported on a truck. It does not necessarily require cranes to take them off the truck. We've got an auxiliary equipment and controls. It contains all our pumps. It contains our blowers. It contains our emission monitoring systems, our mist filters and things like that, and condensate knockouts. So that we can mobilize it very quickly to the site and set up within a few days and start operating. What's going to be special about this particular project is our comprehensive sampling plans. In the original work we did before, the EPA 1633 was not necessarily available. We were working with university labs to do a lot of the analysis. Now we're going to be using the EPA 1633 method on this, as well as the OTM methods for looking at the emission characterization from various points within the treatment system, the raw emissions as well as the process emissions. And we're actually currently hoping to extend our system up to Alaska next week. So we'll be starting to deploy and get ourselves ready for this project. And we're very excited about it. The next project I want to talk to you about is the ER 227470. This is to look at an injectable fuel. The idea is that we could add something that could support smoldering in situ, and that will provide sufficient energy both to mostly destroy, potentially volatilize PFAS and any other co-contaminants that might be located in the pit. So our initial development was this, looking at, well, what could we use? Well, we're familiar with just colloidal activated carbon that's commercially available that can be injected. Emulsified vegetable oils can be injected, and even potentially powdered activated carbon. And so what we're looking at is that what can we do with these to distribute them in the soil, and how will they perform? A lot of colloidal activated carbon applications using for barriers or absorption barriers are typically injected at too low concentrations, provide effective fuel source. We actually have to add quite a bit more. We have to get up into those like 30 gram per range per kilogram of soil to actually get sufficient carbon mass there to support the smoldering process. So what we did initial testing is that, well, what can we do? So we used colloidal activated carbon, CAC, and we also use the EVO. And you can see in the first 2 tests here, like the GAC at 50 grams per kilogram. That's a mistake at the top of the column. That should be kg, not kd. We achieve temperatures over 1,000 Celsius. And then when we use EVO by itself, we find that we only get about 50. We get about 695, a bit too low. But when you combine them, you can get up to really good concentrations. And so the idea here, maybe it's easy to distribute CAC plus mixed in with EVO and inject it into the system. And what's interesting is that you can even change reduce the EVO content and keep and slightly reduce the carbon content from the CAC, and you can even get higher temperatures. Well, it looks like we could have a variety of ranges of what we could do in terms of actually what kind of mixtures we could deliver and what kind of temperature ranges we needed. But there are practical considerations. First off is cost. What are comparable products that can actually allow us to inject this at a cost-effective method? We also have to make sure that we provide sufficient carbon and calcium, because we're going to be, again, adding calcium in a form that would be to help act as a pseudocatalyst to destroy the PFAS. We also have ease of handling. They got to be stable. You can't have it turning into a gel where you're in the process of mixing and delivering it. If we have you add surfactants, they have to be cost effective. And the viscosity requirements are to inject are probably less than 2,200 centistrokes, and to make sure they're at least pumpable, but any kind of method you're going to look at. So we did some more testing. So we looked at colloidal carbon mixed with EVO and calcium hydroxide. We had some challenges, not unexpected. We formed soap, which is not very pumpable. But we did find another packed material called Fluxorb, and we can mix it again with calcium hydroxide water. And it was variable, it's very pumpable. And we then mixed it in with columns test, and then we saw some very promising results. And there's an example at the bottom is a thermocouple profiles from the column test. These are relatively large columns, but the thermocouples are separated about 5 centimeters apart on the center line of the column. And the black line represents when we actually turn off the heater and allow we're just providing air at that point. And as you can see, there's a spike up at each thermocouple as the smoldering front moves through the column. And just to point out, each of those thermocouples are only 5 centimeters apart. So you can see, for example, the yellow line at over 1,000 degrees, the next thermocouple that's only about 5 centimeters away is almost at ambient, and then eventually comes up. So you can see that the smoldering fronts are very, very narrow as they migrate through the column and through the soil. So you can see on the right-hand side, the mixture before and after. You can see it's nice and dry. It looks clean anyways. So we did next steps was we did the intermediate scale reactor testing, and we've just this is looking at fluoride balance, pre and post treatment soil evaluations, and also any other data we needed for design the pilot system. You can see the large column at the side, and at the bottom, the left hand is actually a fairly complex emission sampling stream. We're looking to trap things like hydrogen fluoride and any breakdown products that come off the top of the column. And right now, we've just finished this test. We've just got some results back, literally hot off the press. Basically a non-detect in the soil of the contaminants that were in there. These were soils that were shipped from the site that I'll talk to you about in a few minutes. That were actual fire training area materials that were put in the reactor and tested. And based on at least on the emission side, on looking at scraps we use for GAC and stuff like that, we're not seeing anything in the GAC, but that's still preliminary information, but it looks like it's looking very, very promising that basically what we've seen in our previous work is being replicated in this work as well. So how do we do it in source treatment? And we've done that again on a commercial scale, and I'll also show you some pictures of how we would do this. But basically, we're going to be adding some kind of mixture to a soil mixing material into a source area. And then what we do is we install these heaters in screened wells. These are portable heaters, can be drawn out and moved between the various injection points. And basically, when we start this process, we started off these heaters, which are about 9 kilowatt, and they're very, very low power heaters. We start blowing air at the same time, and we can work on beneath the water table, and that starts displacing the water, heats up the materials in and around the well screen. The ignition starts. We start detecting CO, which is one of the byproducts, gas emissions we track, as well as picking up temperature changes in the thermocouples that are installed near the wells. And then that smoldering front will then propagate away from the well to some radius of influence that's practical. And basically, even underwater, you'll form actually dry soils because you're maintaining water pressure and you're drying up the soils as well as you're going through this process. And then we can just then pull out the heater and repeat that at another location. Typically, we run these things at multiple heater and multiple locations at the same time. So in terms of how we deliver the fuel, we'll probably do some kind of a soil auger, dual axis blenders, for example, to get down to reasonable depths for most sites. And then the nice thing about this is we'll actually be able to, with the amount of materials we're going to be adding and talking to the vendors, we're pretty confident we'll have a fairly uniform distribution of the fuel and the calcium inside the area that needs to be treated. So let's just give you some ideas, some pictures of what this kind of looks like on a real scale. This is, for example, this site I'm showing you as was a creosote contaminated site, 14 hectares, and treating down about 15 meters below the water table. We have a wellhead connection, which at the top there you see the electrical connection to the heater, and then we have the air injection at the top, which is valved, and we can change the airflow to match as the radius of influence and the volume air needs to be increased to maintain the pressure and move out the smoldering front. There's the heater on the right-hand side. We also then have extraction points. These were pulled out, and then in this case, will be for most of these particular PFAS projects, we'll probably then pass it through a granular activated carbon as a polishing step. But for this particular project, we also use things like recuperative thermal oxidizers as necessary. So the treatment that we use for off-gas really is a function of what we think the emissions will be and what makes the most sense from off-the-shelf treatment technologies. We also have a air injection point, and we have data collection where we also collect continuously thermocouple data. We collect CO, CO2, another emission data, and we'll also be collecting for these particular projects also various dedicated systems for looking at PFAS byproducts. So the next steps on this particular project is we're going to Joint Base Cape Cod. Again, our testing is meet cleanup criteria and the source area. And the area that we're going to be treating is going to be about 10 meters by 10 meters by 6 meters, or about 600 cubic meters of material. And then this particular picture shows you a very small scale pilot test we've often done for hydrocarbon testing. But it gives you the same idea of what we would be doing at this site. We'll be mixing it in. We'll be collecting the materials. We'll be passing through collecting the emissions that we needed to verify that we're getting the complete destruction and understand the emission profiles of anything that's coming off. So it is a commercially available technology. We know that smoldering treatment is a proven technology in terms of the work we have done to date. We know that we can add appropriate fuels in situ, ex situ, and combining all of these shows us that we can treat excavated soils and within source areas. What we think the benefits are is really that it's a low cost and on-site alternative for a lot of stuff. We don't have to excavate soil, you don't have to bring in clean soil, we can actually treat on-site and actually reuse the soil and put it back in place. We can also treat other contaminants. And of course, removing off-site disposal or off-site transport reduces liabilities or health and safety concerns. And as well as we can treatment at remote locations as possible, since our energy requirements to run these systems are relatively low. We can run our current system at Jaber basically off the gensets if we had to. And what we're planning to do for most of our sites is have that ability to operate remotely, or we can hook up to the local electrical supply. So we're very positive about in terms of what we can do with this technology, and we're developing quite a capability in this area. So if you got any other questions, feel free to ask, or you can look up some of this information that we've already posted on the SERDP and ESTCP website. With that, I can take some questions, Rilla.
Great, thank you, because we do have a lot of questions. The first one is from the Air Force Civil Engineer Center. What range of soil types do you believe the in-situ application may be applicable to? And for fine grain soils, will the mixing process allow amendments that may make the process more viable?
Yeah, actually, great question. First off, yeah, we have to be able to move air through our porous matrix to have this process going. We have worked with fine silties and even a little bit of clay in the soils we can actually do. But, we definitely can add amendments. We can add sand. We could do things to change the bulking characteristics of the soil to help improve the porosity to allow you to treat in situ or even on site, an ex situ application if necessary. So that is definitely something we can do and we have done. by just adding other bulking materials to change the porosity of the soils that we're treating.
Great, thank you. This next question is from the U.S. Marine Corps. Can petroleum contaminated soil serve as the fuel if the concentration of petroleum is high enough? And this is for in situ applications?
Good question. I think the answer is possibly. As I could point out, the creosote work we did, when we were doing this in New Jersey, we did that work and we had just creosote by itself, and we were hitting some cases 1200, 1300 degrees Celsius, because the fuel content was sufficient to generate that. Generally for hydrocarbons, we probably think we're going to be running roughly around 650 degrees Celsius, roughly, based on most of those sites. So if there is fuel there, it just means we have to add less fuel that we can take advantage of. As I showed in one of those slides, sometimes adding just a little bit of extra colloidal carbon or something like that can, with already hydrocarbon, like an EVO, you already get, a pretty good boost in terms of the temperatures you get.
Thank you, Dave. We've gotten around 4 to 5 questions about the vapors
Yes.
that may be emitted either from in situ or ex situ applications. Can you talk about mitigation efforts to capture all the vapors, and can you also address the mass balance issue?
I'm going to talk about a little bit of the work we've done. We're in the process of getting it published too, coming out, the lab studies that we've done. For example, when we had calcium oxide present in the systems, like probably about 0.02% of the total fluoride in the system was captured as a 2 or 4 chain carbon fluoride compounds. And that was working with fairly high concentration, hundreds of milligrams of PFAS in that particular test. When we did the testing at Canadian Forest Base Trenton in Ontario, we had very similar kind of results, very, very low concentrations of potential byproducts coming out. So we think most of these things can be handled with fairly conventional off-gas treatment like a GAC. Good thing if we use GAC and it becomes contaminated, we can use it as a fuel for another project. So it can be we can use that contaminated material for other treatment of other soils. So and then the hydrogen fluoride is the thing that we've always don't want to manage. Who wants to play with hydrogen fluoride? And that, again, the calcium helps a great deal. And we've seen a massive reduction in the amount of hydrogen fluoride being released compared to we just do smoldering with fuel by itself. So again, we've demonstrated that we get calcium fluoride formation, which is an inert mineral phase. It'll stay on the soil. And so that's not removed at all. And so the hydrogen fluoride is mostly sequestered in our system. So again, that significantly simplifies our gas handling requirements, one in particular, either in situ or ex situ.
Great, thank you so much, Dave. Let's see. Can you smolder water-saturated soil?
Yes. One of the things we will think about is when we're we can do the ex situ. It can be, we don't have to really dewater the soil that much. We can work with it. What it will do is that we just increase the fuel content that we may need to do to get to the temperatures we have. So definitely, we again at the creosote side, I pointed out we were smoldering with 15 meters of water head on top of the screen, and we could propagate that reaction outwards. So that's under fully saturated conditions as well. One of the things we think about too is just like, okay, we've got a lot of water in the system, then we just got to handle like the moisture that comes out. So we have to have appropriate knockouts and everything like that, and collection of that water. So that's what the amount of water that comes out of our system is mostly associated with the water that's in the soil already, and we have to factor that in terms of condensate management.
Great, thank you. This next question is similar to a question that was asked of Mike. And so if you can explain whether the presence of co-contaminants in the soil has similar limitations compared to other technologies. Is that a concern with smoldering, the impact of contaminant mixtures and co-contaminants?
Yeah, so great thing we're working with heat. Unlike a lot of chemical processes where you really have to understand the chemistry. Not that breaking down things thermally is not chemically complex, but it's from the point of view of this, if it breaks down with heat, it will break down smoldering. So if there's VOCs or hydrocarbons, they will be removed from the soil. Now the question with things like very volatile compounds, a lot of them will be probably driven off in the gas phase, and we have to factor that in terms of our off-gas treatment. If there's metals in the soils, they will, if they're going to be potentially oxidized in the process, which could, I think for most cases would not be a problem. But if you got mercury in the soil, we're going to have to worry about volatilizing the mercury and managing that in the gases as well. But I think those are, as long as we know what those kind of compounds are there, we can work around through either treatable testing to figure what would happen and factor that into our off-gas design.
Great, thank you so much. This next question is from Paracon, and it has to do with the cleanup levels. Again, a similar question that Mike got asked. What typical cleanup levels can you get down to in impacted media? How low can you go?
Everything that we've been looking at right now is literally non-detect. We might get a few small detects, but we're running right at the detection limits of the techniques that we've been using, or below or non-detective depths. So yes, we are down into almost as low as you can measure right now under current technique.
Thank you. And this next question is from the U.S. Navy headquarters. Do you have plans to accept spent GAC laden with PFAS as fuel when the technology is commercialized at the full scale?
Good question. There's two things we're thinking about. First off, if we're operating on a site that's got waste GAC being produced, we'll consider taking it and using it in our system. We are also looking at checking out, can we actually treat pure GAC, contaminated pure GAC, without melting reactors and stuff like that? And it looks like the answer, their preliminary work suggests that we can. Because actually the total temperature is not just completely dependent on the concentration, but it also depends on like how much oxygen you have in your system, and you get starvation if you at current atmospheric concentrations of oxygen. If you feed it into, you get basically starvation, the oxygen, so you don't really get the maximum amount of heat being produced. So it is limited by the oxygen. So therefore, it looks like we potentially could treat pure GAC at some point. We're thinking of having an ability to do that as well, come out to a site and use our reactors to treat pure GAC as a waste product.
Thank you, Dave. This next question is from the Marine Corps Base Quantico. Mm-hmm. When we get to field demonstrations, it's promising so far that your lab testing and pilot scale testing is addressing the complete destruction of PFAS, but in the field, how do you plan to confirm complete combustion and ensure that no intermediates are being generated and making it out into the atmosphere?
Okay, we have, besides the future project, we got our current project right now at Edwards Air Force Base, where we're doing treating 10 batches of 10 cubic meters each of different types of soil types. We are collecting gas samples, and we're sending them to Kurt Purnell at Brown University for targeted and non-targeted. We're also collecting. We're doing FTIR to see if we can pick up any kind of byproducts or like very low molecular weight byproducts. And then there's the JBER project that we're going to be doing, which we're going to be doing the full Monty with the EPA OTM 4045. 45 and 50 methods to both look at target and non-target compounds that could be coming off. So we've got a fairly comprehensive sampling regime for these projects. I mean, the total amount of soil being treated at the Edwards is approximately 100 cubic meters, and the one we're doing at Jaber would be probably over 500 cubic meters of a material that we're going to be treating and collecting that information. So we're again, from everything we've seen, we're not expecting any real surprises, but we're going through the full Monty to make sure we can make that 100% confidently.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Dave. One last question for you before we pull Mike back into the discussion. And this is about relative costs. And this is a question from the Air Force Civil Engineer Center. What is the relative cost of the mixing process followed by smoldering relative to excavation and disposal? And this is for relatively shallow soils. So soils less than 15 feet, one is biodestruction, but the other one may be cheaper. Can you address that sort of the pros and cons of both approaches from a cost perspective?
That's a really good question. I'm always hesitant to throw any kind of numbers out because I'm always proven wrong later. But I would say that relatively speaking, you have to, when you're looking at the total project, it's going to be a little bit, I hate to say site specific, but it tends to be how remote you are, how far it is to a landfill that's going to accept it, with the new regulation coming in and what's hazardous waste, that become more expensive soon. What is the cost of replacing the materials? So there's all of that. With respect to in situ soil mixing, from the numbers I have been seeing, the in situ soil mixing is probably just a bit more expensive than a total excavation, considering all the other shoring and everything else you have to do to keep the pit open. And again, it depends on scale and how big that's going to be. My feeling is that the in situ smoldering is going to be ultimately cheaper. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think I could do it cheaper. That's the point of doing it. And I think it'll be allow on-site. It removes a lot of other liability issues with respect to health and safety with excavation and stuff like that, and then transport of those materials off-site and disposing them in other places or transferring to another incinerator, which is definitely going to be far more expensive. So I hope that answers the question. Part of this is we're trying to figure that out. Part of the ESTP program or the in situ is to develop those cost and performance numbers that people can actually hopefully take to the bank.
Thank you so much, Dave. We're going to try and do a bit of a back and forth, try to get to some of the unanswered questions for both you and Mike. And I'll start with Mike. And this is a question from NASAC Southwest. Could your treatment technology be part of a treatment train approach for seawater? For example, oily bilge water?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea there. I think one of the answer is maybe. As we think about the boron nitride, the BN photocat, not just as a sort of a science, but as a deployable technology, we're trying to figure out through sort of funding, what are the most appropriate use cases here. And so if we think that, high salinity waters is going to be an important area for PFAS remediation, or actually just organics treatment, I think the treatment train approach is the right approach. I can't envision the BN photocat to be a standalone under many situations, but because there's just many things in water. But a treatment train approach would be a very appropriate way to sort of do an initial design for sure. But yeah, it's seawater, oil, bilge water, interesting. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And this is a question from the U.S. Forest Service. Have you observed any surface fouling in the vessels that you've used where the UV exposure takes place?
So we haven't seen anything like that yet. And I would say from our partner with Purifix, they haven't found any damage from the UV. Part of it is that they've engineered their system so that the UV lamps are self-enclosed in a self-contained system, and that any light, in fact, there is no light escape from the unit. So.
Thank you. Two questions from several folks on the economics of the process, specifically from an energy point of view. Have you done any scale-up energy estimates and follow-on extrapolations in terms of the actual cost if we were to take this to the field, or is this part of a follow-on exercise that you can discuss briefly?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for where we're at, I think we're starting to climb the hill. We know we have certain checkpoints that we want to hit as we climb up this hill of determining, the cost effectiveness, and part of it includes the energy requirements, not just for running the lamps, but the pumps. Like the cost of the material, I think, is going to be buried within the overall OpEx of it. And then on the scientific side, sort of the classic EEO measurements, and so that can help inform some of the cost issues. But overall, we are shooting for a techno-economic analysis of a standalone unit, and we're not there yet, but we're starting to collect data and the next tranche of work that is on our to-do list for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mike. And Dave, we've gotten about 3 to 4 questions here related to when the follow-on projects and efforts and field demonstrations, when the results from those efforts will be made available, and then a few questions about how they will be made available.
Okay, so that's good questions. First off, the Edwards Air Force Base, we're halfway through. I'm hoping to have all that information that we would like to have released. I mean, through various reports and publications. Publications take longer, but we'd be willing to share those results in as soon as we possibly can when we complete the test. That will be under Air Force discretion of how we release that, but probably through their reporting systems as well as their technical outreach programs. We also have the JABER project we are mobilizing. We'll probably finish that up in May, June, July. We're hoping to have all that wrapped up in September, and then that will be reported through the SERDP and ESTCP program. Of course, also we will be publishing those results. And the in situ project, we were hoping to be out in the field the 4th quarter of this year. So we'll be 2025 before we'll be able to actually release any information on that project.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. And thank you again to both of you. And we're going to go ahead and wrap up with a few reminders. Our next webinar is in 2 weeks on Thursday, May 16. It will be on DoD-funded research efforts to develop environmentally friendly protective coatings for DoD ships and aircraft. We'll have 2 speakers, Dr. Eric Ayazi from the Naval Research Lab and Dr. Michael Brinza from the Naval Air Warfare Center Aircraft Division. You can visit the SERDP and ESTCP webinar webpage to register for this and other webinars through the end of the year. And as Andrea mentioned, I'd like to remind you that the audio and a copy of the presentation of today's session will be archived on our webinar webpage in case you would like to refer to them in the future. We would appreciate it at this time if you can please take a moment to complete the survey that will pop up on your screen. This concludes today's webcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for helping us. Bye-bye.